I'm Greg Jarrett from STACK.aero, and I'll let our panelists do a little introduction for themselves.
Chris Hicks, little shot from Texas. Back again. Thank you.
Hi, I'm James Hardie. I've been in the industry for, in aviation industry for over 30 years, and I know I look a bit younger, but what I'm trying to do now in my consultancy is help people in organizations to lead their teams better by creating leadership at every level in the organization. And I'm doing that using organizational psychology tools and also an experience of aviation to bring that to all sorts of different people and leaders. And I hope that I'll be able to explain some of that, how with things like AI and technology adoption, we can improve things for people in our organizations and create proactive leadership at every level in our teams.
Thank you. Chris Müller, I'm from Switzerland and NGFT Solutions. What we do is we are like a one-stop shop for operators. We provide software, we provide training, we provide support when they are working on operating manuals. So basically our focus is for small to medium-sized operators. And they have been integrating large language models and AI solutions into our software for the last 2 years now. So we have had quite a bit of experience on that front, and we're trying to push the envelope if we can.
Hello everyone, my name's Anthony Wilkinson. I'm the Business Development Manager for GAMIT. We're part of the AMAC AEROSPACE group of companies. GAMIT has 3 core businesses at our location in Stansted. We deal with spares, repairs and logistics, camo services, and we are pioneering a solution known as Roam, which is driving operational efficiency for MROs, airlines and lessors. We utilize optical character recognition, AI and machine learning to do this.
Excellent, thank you. I want to start with a little bit of a clarification of AI. Everyone's talking about it, it's a shiny object. What does it really mean? So there's sort of 3 or 4 categories of AI. There's machine learning, there is general AI, and there is intelligent algorithms. And Anthony, I might let you go into a bit more detail on those.
Yeah, of course. Machine learning is hugely important, especially from the side I come from, where we are scraping the data from technical records so that we're able to provide camo teams, records teams with the ability to easily identify any kind of piece of information that they would be looking for, be that a part number, a certificate to release for service, an AD, an SB. One of the things that Roam uses in particular is machine learning. And that is to identify the patterns on all of these task cards and different pieces of documentation. By then using OCR over the top of the documents, we can extract the metadata from these, which then basically turns your repository of aircraft documentation into your own personal Google. Internet of Things, not quite my area, but yeah, I'm sure one of the other guys would be able to know. No? Okay, well, Internet of Things is sensors really, isn't it? So gleaming data from all of the sensors on an aircraft or any kind of other vehicle.
Yeah, Internet of Things is exactly what it is. It's exactly what it says. It's devices or things that are connected to the internet in some form. They're receiving or sending messages. They are sensors or adapters in some way that are transmitting a signal of some sort.
Yeah, it was a few years ago, about 10 years ago, I wrote an article called The Internet of Aircraft Things, and I kind of did some research on what that might mean. And they claim that one of the first Internet of Things was a Coke machine at Carnegie Mellon University, where they'd set up a sensor so that they knew when how long the Coke had been delivered for, so whether it was cold or not. But actually, I think that you could argue that aviation introduced the Internet of Things just a little bit before that, with the arrival of data link and the on-off out-off, on-in reporting of data link, which used the door sensors and the brakes and the weight on wheel switches to help with understanding the flight profile of aircraft, and then it became two-way information. So we've been at the cutting edge as an industry for many years now.
It's rare for someone to say we're at the cutting edge of anything in business aviation, I think, especially technology. I want to talk a little bit about the role of AI, and can each of you talk a bit about how you yourselves are using or applying AI, and how you use it from a sense of is it an assistant, a decision maker, is it an analyst for you? Can you go into a bit of detail on how you're using it, if you're using it? Christian?
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm good. Oh, Christian. I'm
It
good.
can, yeah, we'll get used to it. I think it can be all of that, because when you talk about large language models and the use of these models in applications, actually, with language, we're able to give commands. We're actually able to give back results to analyze these results. And actually, what we see in our technology, we have now chains of agents working with each other, one providing information for the next one to complete. And so I think what we really have to understand is there is really not a lot of limits to this. And what we have to be sure is that when we talk about decision making, I think for me the case is clear. Decisions are taken by us, point, right? And I have to say, I talk specifically about large language models, which deal with language. When we talk about large data, for example, there's many sensors flying an approach. Then we talk about quantitative data with, deltas from the ideal line and so on. That's a different thing. But with regards to language, it's up to us to really make these decisions, and you have to build your processes, you have to build your tools, so you are in the loop, and at specific points in time, you can actually see the results of the analysis or whatever intermediate step the LLM has been taking, and then you review, you evaluate, and you sign off before it does the next step.
I mean, we're facing, we're in a time where there's more data and information out there than we've ever experienced before. And how do we turn that into knowledge and then ultimately into some kind of wisdom? Well, I think that's where things like the large language models are really helping us, in terms of they've got access to large volumes of information that if we carefully and prescriptively, using the prompts, using other tools in the system, we can set the parameters of what information they're going to go look at, what data sets, what knowledge sets are out there, like should it be peer-reviewed academic papers, or should it be some guy down the pub who posted something on Twitter the other day? Well, you can use that if you like, and that's the danger if you just go on to, say, ChatGPT, which I use quite frequently. If you just go, it's improving, but initially, you could ask it a question, and it's like it's using a probabilistic answer, as you may well be aware of, but you want to point it in the right direction. You want to use the right sort of sources, and that includes in your organization setting up things such that you you're using data sets that you trust, and then you're also analyzing with as a human to make the decisions, as you say there. So in order to make decisions as a human, you have to have some kind of expert knowledge. And I think this is where there's a little bit of danger at the moment that's been talked about in the press at the moment, like the entry-level jobs for young people are kind of being taken because the support that those young interns is being perhaps usurped by AI models, which can do that work very quickly for more experienced people. But then where's that going to leave us in the future? So, I think that's a challenge that we're looking at, as humans around the world, and developing, the opportunity for the future. But also things are going to change in terms of how we go about doing things, and that's the bit that we need to get to grips with. The change is going to happen. Whether or not you're part of it, or whether you're sitting there going, well, I'll just see it out till retirement, or I wonder if it gets better in the future, maybe I'll do it then. Well, you may well be left behind and someone else will come and eat your lunch. I've been in the business deploying software as a service in business aviation some years ago, and watching people, when I showed them a flight plan that took like a minute just put the information in and to throw it to them online, and then they're sitting there looking at me like, oh my God, that was going to take me like 3 hours to figure that out. What am I going to do this afternoon? I'm like, I don't know what you're going to do this afternoon, but this has happened. So it's up to us now as well. This comes to the regulatory part of it all, is that we can also guide the way things go. And what we think is important, especially in a highly regulated industry like aviation, it's up to us to choose how our industry develops to some degree. But it doesn't develop by sitting back and procrastinating about whether you should step forward into the future. You're kind of going to get dragged there one way or another.
Thanks, James. Chris, how are you using AI?
All right, well, if you did, I wasn't an expert this morning, and the jet lag and the time of day is going to make it worse in the subject matter. But I'm going to try to wrap this all together from a simplistic point of view. We talked about collaboration all day, talked about regulations all day. I'm not going to be the company that comes up with an internal AI large language model. It's just not going to happen. My concern, and I'll just throw this out there, is there's a lot of little companies, from the wheel and brake shop from this morning to my little company, other little companies, that are wanting to get on board with this. We don't know how. Right now we use a lot of good chat GPT for some of our LinkedIn posts. Does a pretty good job when I'm out of town and the boss has to do it. But I know this, and we need this. And I know there's a lot of areas that can help us. It can help us in training, all this kind of stuff. If anything needs to be collaborated on, I believe this is probably one of the biggest areas, because we can't, God love the OEMs, we can't let them do their big thing and then tie it all up in them. It's got to be shared amongst everyone, and I just want to make that point.
So that brings up a really good question. How do we do this is the question, but I want to add to that, how do we do this without exposing all of our customer data and all of our proprietary data, number one, across the whole internet, but to our competitors as well? How do we do this in a way that is private and secure? If Anthony or Christian?
It's an incredibly tough question. At the moment, there aren't really any practices in place that would allow us to completely privatize data. Obviously, you and I spoke about blockchain very briefly earlier. There's potential there, but at this moment in time, I think it's almost impossible to completely privatize all of the data.
No, it's actually really easy.
Fair enough.
Point one, have your own LLM. You don't have to train it, but own an LLM. Point two, have your own databases where you can protect the data of your clients, and have a dashboard where you can actually build this interaction. 3 points, really simple. Everybody could do it. Maybe not to program, but in your companies, you have people who can do this. It's not that hard. But I think these 3 conditions really allow you to do this right now. And we're a small company. We've done it numerous times. We had these discussions with our clients. They said, how are you going to do it? How are you going to protect my data? Is it going to go to Silicon Valley? And I said, no. There's lots of open source models out there that you can use. And the good thing is they improve over time. You just have to imagine this to be like the engine of a car. You get every half a year, you get an upgrade. You get a better engine. So the only thing you have to do is to take the new engine, replace the old one, and you're better off. It's incredible what can be done right now. It's not that hard. But I think what you said, Chris, is really important. How do we actually bring people to initiate that change? And when I look into the audience, it's people like my age, I think, more or less, and we grew up in the analog area, paper. For us, the biggest change is to really embrace this technology and let the younger people actually execute. But we have to lead the way. We have to be there, take a leap of faith, and say, let's do this. Have guardrails with it? Of course. But it's up to us to make the decisions, because you are the decision makers. You take the decision. And, if you don't quite understand it, have people explain it to you. Yeah, as you said, it's here to stay. We just have to do it.
I want to just sort of, there's a little bit of ancient wisdom out there from like Marcus Aurelius, like the obstacle is the way. It's all the reasons that you're thinking, perhaps some of you out there, why I should not do this, why I should wait, are the reasons how to do it. They are concerns, and you should address them, and you should ask those difficult questions, and then still take the step forward. And you will find that you then are running, you know, as we have to build in things around compliance and future regulations. Currently in the UK, there's very little regulation on AI. In the EU, there is the EU AI acts. And you know, they're explaining how they think things should go, what highway we should be on to move forward. The UK, it's a little bit more signposted. However, there's still a lot of room for this to be defined. And our industry, which is highly regulated, should be in good shape to define things. Now, when it comes to the smaller, fragmented elements of business aviation, where you've got lots of small operators out there, less than 5 aircraft, that kind of thing. Most of the industry kind of looks like that. That fragmentation is going to mean that you don't really necessarily have the statistical power in your own organization to make the kind of really beneficial elements happen. Now, if you're a part of an engine an engine program, then that's all done by Rolls-Royce and Pratt & Whitney and everything. They do that at a large scale for you. That doesn't necessarily exist when it comes to the airframes and all the other parts that you might also gain competitive advantage. So one of the issues that was raised this morning, the future of MROs, was around, you know, shared resources and all that sort of thing. It can be done. We can anonymize data. They already do that in the healthcare system. They already do that in the legal systems. There's no reason why it can't be done, and we absolutely should be able to do it. In fact, there's going to be things around managing the parts and supply issues that people have been talking about. You know, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to predict the whole lifetime of an aircraft with a digital twin and things like that. So we should be able to be anticipating those things, but it will require some elements of data to be shared, actual data. It will also require some elements of data to be understood statistically with a sufficient level of statistical power to be able to make predictions about it. And that's where I would invite the people that are going to be running this in the future, the people who get on board sooner rather than later.
I think that actually leads me to the staffing question that's been coming up repeatedly, is how do we attract young people into this industry? And if you're asking a young tech to fill out a maintenance log that's a piece of paper that he puts in a folder and it goes away somewhere, that tech is not going to feel like they're doing something that's modern. Whereas if you can have an AI tool or some sort of automation tool that they feel like they're at the cutting edge of technology and their industry is pushing them forward, that's going to be a really, really good way of attracting and keeping people in the industry. If they feel like they're using old technology, they're going to find a job that's more attractive somewhere else.
There was a post on LinkedIn the other day, I don't know if the person's in the room, but they announced how their business was growing. They were now having to buy an extra fireproof cabinet. Well, congratulations.
And speaking about manual logs as well, this is obviously, filling out all this manual paperwork has been an absolute burden for people over the past 50, 100 years. But that process has actually built up a huge wealth of documentation. And as humans, we're not going to go and read 1 million pages of tech logs, but you could throw 10 million pages of tech logs at an OCR reader, ingest that information, and that trains your LLM, trains your private LLM.
Yeah, I completely agree. Oh, sorry.
Well, I was just going to add, you know, I asked that question a little bit leadingly. This is the second time I've been on one of these panels, one during a safety day, and I just want to reemphasize what you said. We have to share some of this information from a safety standpoint. Known issues, blah, blah, blah. We've got to figure out how to make that happen safely. Secondly, from a recruiting standpoint, it's a huge tool to make us look like we're as leading edge as we think we are. So it's just a matter of making sure we can all do it together. And like you said, I agree. My company, Brian, God love him, loves using ChatGPT, and he's trying to figure out ways to put it into a business. So, yeah, get on board. We're already going to try to get on board. And we've had a computerized work order at Dallas Automotive, a signature. We had one of the first multi-installations of Corridor in the world, and actually the first. And so, you know, for me, written logbooks is a thing of way past. All I really want is somebody to tell me how I can do a logbook research and have it tell me what all ADs and SBs are missing, and I don't have to pay somebody $17,000 to do it. That's what I really want out of AI. So, but what you just said, that's possible. Just put it all in there.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you were saying about the tens of millions of documents within paper archive somewhere. Some of our customers have over 220 aircraft in their fleets, so we actually have hundreds of millions of bits of documentation within Rome. It would give us the opportunity to do a fantastic job of training an LLM. I completely agree with that. My hesitance still comes from the side of protecting, especially from a commercial point of view, a commercial airline. There might be information in there which they could see as a strategic value to themselves, and we wouldn't be able to put that into a shared platform and then offer that to our customers as a data point. It would have to be on a one-by-one basis.
I think, yes, I agree. I think what we need to understand is that data can be stored separately on separate areas in a database, and still you can have a common area where you share data. Like, we've been working on a safety management system where people actually are able to, have their reports analyzed by AI, which saves them between 70 to 80% of their time. And then they can decide to share this report with other people or other companies who are also on the safety management system. So it's automatically anonymized and shared. So I think those are some of the things that we certainly can do. And, with the wealth of knowledge that you're talking about, we have now 40,000 accident reports on our database, and we have been matching them with the ECARES taxonomy. And I think that's also something that, when we talk about sharing, we need to be able to compare these events. We need to be able to make sure that when you analyze a document, then if I get access to that, I can analyze it as well with the terms that I have. So we have used ECARES, which is the international standard for describing events in aviation. So basically what we can do is we can take the content of the accident report and actually match it with the ECARES taxonomy, and then we can store that part. So we're able to say, please give me all the work-related accidents that have been, with tools left on the aircraft. And it will be able to extract, first of all these accidents, and then you can start to run analysis. Give me an analysis on this. Provide me with the underlying factors. What are some of the commonalities? We're able to extract information through this kind of common taxonomy that we did not have before.
Yeah.
And that is one of the big potentials that I see, because, if we can agree on a standard, how to match it, how to analyze it, we'll be able to expand the knowledge exponentially.
Yeah, trend analysis for sure is going to be one of the most important things, I believe, in predictive maintenance going forward. I mean, if you're able to look at a holistic view of your entire fleet and then compare asset by asset, why is this engine underperforming when this one's not? They're both the same model. What's going on here? Is there an LLP mismatch? Is there something going on that is actually causing, it might even be just a tiny problem, but you're not getting the same level of efficiency from that particular asset. I think asset management is going to be absolutely modernized by AI.
Yeah, so, I mean, the airline business are, from my understanding of it, they've sort of struggled with the who owns the data and who should return it, and how do we share big data, or why should we? And I think it's partly to do with the fact that many airlines have probably got enough statistical power in the way that their fleets are, that they've got all the information they need to make a reasonable decision, and how they operate their aircraft might be a source of their own competitive advantage when compared to anyone else. It's not necessarily the case in business aviation, because, I mean, an airline fleet, 180 sectors to 200 sectors a month, 4,000 hours per aircraft per year or something like that. Business jets, I think the top rated is about 1,200 hours a year for some of them. It's just we're not really operating the aircraft the same, and the competitive nature is not the same either, because you know, how many times are you competing on the same route for, you know, there is an oversupply which might create a cause of competition, but I don't think it's like how you operate the aircraft that's caught, you know, is necessarily allowing you competitive advantage in a way that could be seen by decisions made by passengers. So what do we need to do then? Well, I think then you can sort of go, what would be the reasons to share information? One of them you've already mentioned is safety, which already exists. I think there's a second one that's looming large in our industry, and it's about sustainability. So if we can share information in such a way that allows us to operate more effectively and efficiently, to then learn about how our industry could be better, maybe that's like allocation of aircraft, whether they should be moved around at different times, how could partnerships between other operators be managed in different ways. That is an opportunity to improve our industry. And yes, it might change the way things are, and some people won't like it because they want to see things stay the way they are. But it might also keep us in the game where, as an industry, we also have to justify the use of these aircraft in an increasingly sort of hostile environment that we're facing as an industry.
Chris, I think you made a really good point earlier about a lot of the companies in this industry don't know where to start in terms of everyone's talking about AI, but how do we actually do something that's productive with this? I'll put it out to the panelists. How do they start?
You've heard enough. Well, honestly, that's the question. I've been enjoying these panels. I go to a lot of these local events, like I mentioned, and the AI is a big thing. Safety is always a big thing. I mean, that's where you start. I mean, I've got a corridor work order system now. I could put it together and see what are our biggest squawks on an airplane, or well, if an airplane went out and came back, which rarely happens, thank God to us. But why did the airplane come back with a squawk when it went out clean a week ago? You know, what happened? What did I miss there? So that's, you know, one place to start. That's what I can think of right now, other than marketing. But that's.
I think there's some amazing, ideas that are out there. When you think about things like flight operations quality assurance, you're kind of looking into the past and saying, hey, what happened on that flight? What do we need to do to correct the management and the operation of that aircraft with the pilots, or the way that they taxied it, and all of those kind of things. However, most of those times, you know, when you're sort of looking at an airline level, they're kind of like they're flying scheduled routes. They are doing it with different crews, you know, so they lose some of that sort of corporate or crew room knowledge that, you know, in the Air Force used to sit around the crew telling stories. That gets lost. So how can we incorporate information about flights that have happened in the past, and then perhaps, you know, correlate them to a flight you're about to do? So it could be that now we've got very good knowledge of the past and the information that went on. We've got the weather patterns, we've got the way the aircraft was operated, and we might have some inkling that a certain flight was not operated very well because similar weather systems and other traffic and you know, the time of day or whatever it is existed. And so then you can send the crew a kind of warning, like, look, this is going to be a pretty difficult flight for you. You know, you haven't flown across the intertropical convergence zone for a few months. The last time you did your unusual attitude chaining, you know, you could just warn them about a few things and get ahead of things. And that's where I see like the opportunity. It's like, it's not just predictive maintenance, but it's like just predicting the future. You can see how, you know, ideas around digital twins are quite useful, and they're running those things in all sorts of ways. They're probably running them in battle space scenarios. And there's a lot of interesting stuff. We've got Diami here as well about like open source intelligence. That's kind of like the way I always look at things like that. Is like when you're doing a puzzle and you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, say, if you've ever done one, and suddenly you go, it's a house in the countryside. It looks like it's a thatched cottage, and you've only done 10% of the thing by then. So the opportunity and the way that these systems are looking at data and seeing a future is quite interesting, but it still needs that human element of like confirmation, or has it gone completely down a blind alley here? How did it come to that conclusion? We need to wind that back and not necessarily base our decision on it. But as we increasingly improve those decision making sources, then we'll get better at making decisions because we'll have better access to information. The systems that we're using will help us to make better decisions, and we can control the inputs that are there as well and create the outcomes that we want.
I'm a bit, I see those, but I'm a bit more pragmatic. First of all, I want to try to make my employees' life easier. And what do I mean with that? Well, you know, if a pilot has to fill out a report in the evening, well, you know, I want to cut down the time he needs to do that, at least by 50%, so he can go home to his family. For example, just being able to dictate what he has worked on today, and then it's automatically just transcribed and fill into the respective forms, so you could actually file that. I think that those are the things that also help to increase acceptance of these systems inside a company, because, you know, we should not underestimate the change that goes with that. Yeah, we will have, you know, with these kind of tools, you're really able to cut down in time, but people need to accept it. We need to make sure that they don't have this kind of side Excel sheet somewhere where they still fill in some data, you know, because they need to be able to trust the system. And when we start with these small steps that make their life easier, that's, I think, where we should start. And it will also allow us as you know, a company who integrates this to understand, like, what are the effects of this implementation. And then as we also grow our experience working with these tools, we're able to implement more complex systems. Like what you said, I think this is where we should go. But we need to learn to walk before we can run.
If you're implementing any kind of digital solution, my advice would be speak to your engineers, speak to your camo team, find out where are the pitfalls for them, where is the task that they could, which could be replaced by a digital solution, which will enable them to give you a better service, much more efficiency. And lastly, I would implore everyone to speak to all of the companies in the digital space, find a solution provider that is going to fit to your operation. It is absolutely no good if you go and find something that you have to, you know, make the square fit in a circle. It's not going to happen. Find something that fits for your operation and fund a company that wants to support you in your operation without changing you.
That's some good advice. We're coming up to the last few minutes, so I might throw it out to the audience for any questions.
Hi, Liz Mosscrop with Gear Up TV. Love this panel, love AI. ChatGPT is my best friend for everything at the moment. But to your point about bringing young people into the industry and the jobs going, I think that technical jobs are going to be gold dust, not gold dust for the industry, because until robots and actual robotics catch up with what we're doing with the intellectual skills with the AI, we're going to be really lost. And I think it's really important that older generations, such as myself, are in there and really helping to tailor AI and to work with young people. Where do you see kind of the convergence of this, of bringing young people in for these skills that we're going to need, and also the responsibility of the older generation to share some of the great stuff we've had the opportunity to receive in our youths?
Convergence has a few meanings. I think in terms of timeline, it's not as far away as you think it is. I think it's going to be driven by lack of people coming in and then people moving out of business at the other end. And there's going to be a gap, and we're going to have to move really, really quickly to train those people up and to train the LLMs. But you're exactly right that the people turning the spanners, popping the rivets, doing the actual work, they still have to do the actual work. That is not changing anytime soon. So give them the tools to do what they do better, but don't make them fill in a form that takes 50% of their time to fill in the paperwork.
And, you know, if I may add to that, I think, you know, with the time that we save with AI, this frees up time to train. And we really have to be careful, because as you mentioned, with younger people not having the opportunity to learn these kind of basic skills, how do they get to the certain level of experience so that they can actually make good decisions? And it's actually possible to really assign, to say, okay, of the 70 to 80% time saved, 50% can be used for other things, and 20% will be invested in training, getting you ahead, making you better, giving you the experience. I mean, right now we're building a tutor. We have built a tutor where basically the people can just ask questions, and based on reference material, the AI will give back responses. It's like this kind of interactive approach where people can start to learn more about what they do. So the knowledge transfer is really, really important, especially from the older generation to the younger, but also the younger generation learning on their own and then adapting what they've learned to what they do.
Yeah, I think diffusion of knowledge is going to be is going to change. I've said it a couple of times to people today. Most of us, many of us, not most of us necessarily, but many of us might be old enough to remember not using email at work. I certainly do. The way things have changed, and if you remember as well how people told you things were going to be like, social media will be like this, and they got that wrong. So I don't know how valuable it is to say how AI will be, as much as it is to sort of try and look at where it is now and where we can reap some benefits. And then, things are gonna be different in the future. We don't quite know what they all are. There's certainly some reasons why some people might say it's going to be a certain way or another. They're putting their thumb on the scales, and maybe they're right. Who knows? We'll see. But for right now, there is an opportunity to be grasped, and we'll just have to grasp it and see whether it stings us or not. But you grasp the nettle, it doesn't sting you, does it?
I just want to remind, us, of the older generation, of which I'm getting closer to, or am. Sometimes knowledge goes the other way. You bring these young people in for a reason. You've put them through the process of hiring them. You've vetted them. They came recommended from somebody. Don't just start telling them how to do things without listening to how they might want to do it, as long as it's not a safety issue. Knowledge goes both ways. If you can't learn something from the younger generation, that is your fault. And you need to look inside yourself and fix it. That's it. Little soapbox, sorry.
Took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Nope, I think that's it. Okay. I will hand... Yep. I'll hand over to Jan-Guillaume Jacquard for the operator's approach to maintenance.